Are you about to go see Dune Part 2, but you kind of forget what happened in the last movie? Are you like me, and the names of people and places in a brand new fantasy sci-fi world kind of just fly over your head the first time you watch something? Or do you just need a crash course in all the things that happened in the last Dune movie before you go in to watch the second? If any of those apply to you, then you've come to the right place. Dune is a sci-fi fantasy series with an expansive lore to it. And the film by French-Canadian filmmaker Denis Villeneuve does a great job at unlocking this world for a new audience. And it really is the perfect film for me, both in terms of its writing, its cinematography, the score, the practical and special effects. They all come together to create a unified, amazing vision. This is a film that blew me out of the water the first time I went to see it in theaters. And before Dune Part 2 releases in theaters, I wanted to get this video out going over the story of Dune so far, the names of people and worlds, so that you can kind of have an understanding of this universe, as well as everything that happened in the first film so that you can feel better prepared for the second. And for any fans of the books who may watch this video, I am purely just going over the lore that we have seen from the first Dune movie from Denis. I won't be going over any of the lore from the books, though I will be using certain information from the books to explain things that weren't really explained in the first movie, but I won't be spoiling where the story goes or any of the extended lore from the books. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and let's get into the video. I don't even know if you can see my hand doing this. I just set this camera up, so I hope this looks good. Welcome to my new office, by the way. I moved. You probably realized that. Beginning with the main planets that we have seen in Dune so far. So far, we have only really seen a good look at 3 major planets. First, we have Caladan, which is the homeworld of House Atreides. This is an oceanic world that is rich with life. Then we have Gedi Prime, or JD Prime, the homeworld of House Harkonnen. It is largely volcanic, with many of the world's forests lost to heavy logging operations and rapid industrialization. And then we have Arrakis, the homeworld of the Fremen. It is a desert planet that is rich in spice, a mineral that is extremely valuable in the Empire. Speaking of spice, the spice is a psychoactive drug that is only found on Arrakis. To the Fremen, it is a hallucinogen and a sacred substance. It is prolonged exposure to the spice that has given the Fremen people their signature blue-tinted eyes. For most people, the spice can grant a longer lifespan and a heightened awareness of the environment around them. But to a rare few people, the spice can also grant premonitions. And we'll talk about what that means later. To the Empire, spice is used for interstellar travel, and since it can only be found on Arrakis, this makes it an extremely rare and an extremely valuable resource. It is also extremely dangerous to harvest because of the hazardous conditions of the planet itself, and because of the fact that the sand deposits, the spice deposits, are guarded by these giant sandworms, which the Fremen refer to as Shai Hulud. And now to dive into a little bit of the political system that governs the universe of Dune. In the universe of Dune, there is a massive empire that stretches throughout the entire known universe. It is ruled by Emperor Shaddam IV, who will be played by Christopher Walken in the upcoming movie. And reigning underneath the Emperor are a series of houses, which basically act as separate kingdoms with their own rulers, but all are subservient to the Emperor. But these houses do theoretically exist in order to keep the Emperor's power in check. In the books, there are 8 major houses, but so far in the movie, we have only seen 2 houses. The first is House Atreides, which is ruled by Duke Leto Atreides I. He was also known as Leto the Just, because he was seen as a fair and compassionate ruler. Lady Jessica Atreides is his concubine and gave birth to his heir, Paul Atreides. And the second major house is House Harkonnen, which is ruled by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. He is a greedy and despotic ruler. Physically speaking, his greed is evident in his gluttony. He has gained so much weight over the years that he can no longer walk on his own. And so in the movie, he makes use of these cybernetics that nullify gravity, allowing him to float in this very eerie way. This is not specifically in the books, but is rather a nod to past live-action adaptations of Dune, in which the Baron floats. The Baron has no sons, but he does have 2 nephews. There is Glossu Rabban Harkonnen, who is also known as the Beast for his fierceness in battle, and Glossu's younger brother, Feyd-Rautha, who is played by Austin Butler in the upcoming movie. It is Feyd-Rautha who is heir to the Harkonnen throne. And while we haven't seen any of the other houses yet in this franchise, we have seen a few major groups in the movie. The first being the Sardaukar, who are known as the Emperor's Blades. They are a special military force that serve the Emperor directly, and they are widely regarded as the most skilled and most feared warriors in the Empire. Then there is the Spacing Guild, who have a monopoly on all space travel and banking within the Empire. We also have the Bene Gesserit, a matriarchal political and religious order within the Empire. This group is led by the Reverend Mother Superior, who acts as an advisor and soothsayer to the Emperor himself. This order is also known for operating in the shadows, manipulating kingdoms and bloodlines to suit their own interests. And finally, we have the Fremen. They are the indigenous people of the planet Arrakis, and they reside in underground cities they call Sieches. And they are largely distrusting of outsiders, given the fact that most of the outsiders they come into contact with are greedy and violent and only want the spice and will just kill Fremen without a second thought. I think their distrust of outsiders is very fair, and is definitely not an analogy for the indigenous peoples of North and South America with European colonization. There's absolutely no undertones or allegory in this franchise at all. It's purely just a space movie, and that's it. Not only are politics important to the world of Dune, but so is religion. And to explain religion in Dune, we need to talk a little bit more about the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit have a branch known as the Missionaria Protectiva, which is quoted as being their black arm of superstition. The Bene Gesserit like to control societies from the shadows, and the easiest way to do that is through religion. The Missionaria Protectiva involved planting myths and superstitions in different societies, and this includes the Fremen. Specifically, they planted a myth of a person called Lisan Al-Gaib, or the voice from the outer world. This messianic figure would come from off-world and lead the Fremen into a golden age as their Mahdi, which is another Fremen word for Messiah. This is the path that the Bene Gesserit made on Arrakis for Paul. No harm will come to him on the planet because they believe that Paul could be their deliverer. And so, is the myth of Lisan al-Gaib real? Maybe not. But then again, if someone does come from the outer world who knows all the prophecies and fulfills them all to the letter, does the Lisan al-Gaib then not become real? We getting philosophical on this channel now. But that is not the extent of Paul's destiny, because the Bene Gesserit have a superstition of their own. The Bene Gesserit are, as I said, a matriarchal order, and the Reverend Mother Superior, through the spice, has access to the genetic memory of all past female ancestors. Genetic memory is a concept in Dune where the knowledge and wisdom of all past Bene Gesserit from the millennia can be unlocked in the genetics of the current Reverend Mother. This is limited, however, because they can only access the genetic memory of the female Bene Gesserit and not the male Bene Gesserit. Because yes, there are male Bene Gesserit. Technically, Paul is a male Bene Gesserit. But because of this, there is a belief that there will come a male Bene Gesserit who has the gift of premonitions, who will be able to unlock the full genetic memory of the Order, both male and female. The Order has been controlling empires and bloodlines for millennia in the hopes of bringing about this person, the Kwisatz Haderach. I hope I'm saying all of these right. The Kwisatz Haderach would then be placed on the imperial throne and govern with the knowledge and wisdom of the millions or billions of Bene Gesserit that came before him. Paul's mother, of course, believes that he is the Kwisatz Haderach, but he has a long way to go before the Bene Gesserit order themselves believe it. And so with all that background established, here is a brief recap of all that happened in Dune Part 1. The first of these movies primarily establishes the world of Dune, as well as laying out all the pieces in place for what's to come in Part 2. It begins, of course, with the Harkonnens being in control of the spice trade on Arrakis. And the decades of having sole access to the spice has made the Baron extremely wealthy. During this time, Chani was born on Arrakis, and she grows up with her people being oppressed and slaughtered by the Harkonnens. And then suddenly, the Emperor gives the order that control of the spice trade be handed over to House Atreides. This puts them in a very tense position. House Atreides has much of the favor of the other houses, and this makes the Emperor nervous. In taking Arrakis from the Harkonnen and giving it to their rivals the Atreides, the Emperor sets the stage for a war. As we will find out, this was very intentional, but we'll get to that in a bit. On Caladan, the Reverend Mother Superior of the Bene Gesserit arrives to test Paul. Jessica was ordered only to bear daughters, but in order to give Duke Leto Atreides his heir, and also because she thinks she can create Kwisatz Haderach, Jessica gave birth to a son. He inherits a lot of power and could be extremely dangerous. In order to test his gift of foresight and his control over his own impulses, the Reverend Mother submits him to the Gom Jabbar test. He passes and is allowed to live, but he must tread carefully. And so the Bene Gesserit pave the way for Paul and Jessica on Arrakis, planting superstitions of the Lisan Al-Gaib. This transitional period is known as the Change. House Harkonnen leaves Arrakis, and House Atreides comes to take possession. Duncan Idaho is sent ahead to scout the planet and to broker alliances with the Fremen. Duncan is widely regarded as a powerful warrior who is feared even by the Harkonnen. Also known to the Harkonnen is Gurney Halleck, the War Master for House Atreides. He stays behind on Caladan to prepare his men and to prepare Paul for the tense situation that the house now finds themselves in. Then Duke Leto Atreides, his family, his military, and his personal guard then travel to Arrakis. Once they are there, they are met with Dr. Liet Kynes, the judge of the Change. She is appointed by the Emperor to oversee the change on Arrakis. She is also a Fremen. It isn't said in the movie, but in the book she's actually a leader of the Fremen. Both in the book and in past live-action adaptations, Dr. Kynes is a man, but is played by Sharon Duncan Brewster in this movie, and I think she did a fantastic job. As they get settled in on Arrakis, an assassination attempt on Paul's life is made by a Harkonnen agent. The flak for this falls on Tufir Huwat, who is the Master of Assassins for House Atreides. Tufir is also what is known as a Mentat. After computers were abolished thousands of years ago, Mentat were trained to act as human computers, being able to process astronomical amounts of information and calculations in a split second. That's why in the movie, whenever someone asks him a question, he rolls his eyes into his head and comes back with a number right away. Speaking of people with special abilities, we also have Dr. Wellington Yue. He is a Suk doctor. In other words, he was trained at the Suk Medical School. He is able to assess a patient's condition just by placing his hand on them. It's never really explained, it's just really cool. I wish real visits to the doctor were this easy. I'm currently recovering from a sickness myself. I'm deaf in this ear right now. Duncan Idaho returns and brings a leader from the Fremen to meet with the Duke. This Fremen is Stilgar, who is played by Javier Bardem. It is in this meeting that Duke Leto Atreides establishes that he wishes to make alliances with the Fremen and not to treat them as their past oppressors have. And after this successful meeting, Stilgar just leaves. The Duke then also investigates the spice harvesting and storage equipment that the Harkonnens have left. And spoiler alert, the Harkonnens sabotaged everything. They only have a small handful of silos, and the mining vehicles are in poor condition. Meanwhile, on Gaidi Prime, the Baron plots his next move. As it turns out, the Emperor wanted House Harkonnen to destroy the Atreides, and so they were sent onto Arrakis to die. But we'll get to that later. The Reverend Mother knows this and makes the Baron vow to let Jessica and Paul live, as they are under Bene Gesserit protection. As scary as House Harkonnen is, even they will not directly mess with the Bene Gesserit. He gives his word, but secretly plans to just leave Paul and Jessica to the elements of the desert, which will theoretically kill them. Baron Harkonnen also employs the Sardaukar, the Emperor's private army, to help with this slaughter, essentially. And he also has an ace in the hole. Dr. Yue is a traitor. The Baron takes his wife hostage, so he feels he must help the Baron do this. He takes down the shields and disables the satellites above Arrakis and paves the way for the Baron and his army. Yue also disables the Duke, but gives him a tooth filled with poisonous gas. He had no choice in delivering Leto to the Baron, but he hopes that in his final moments, Leto will be able to kill the Baron. House Atreides fights bravely, but the battle quickly turns into a slaughter, and they are overwhelmed by the sheer numbers against them. And the only people to escape that we know of are Jessica and Paul, who are kidnapped by the Harkonnens, and then Duncan and Gurney, who escape on their own. Jessica and Paul manage to kill their captors and then escape into the desert. And the city where House Atreides, as well as many Fremen immigrants reside in, is completely destroyed, along with all of their ships. The Baron enters the Duke's home and helps himself to the Duke's food, while he lays there helpless.
You have a wonderful kitchen, cousin.
Unsurprisingly, the Baron kills Dr. Yue. Believing his family is dead and his entire house is destroyed, Leto releases the poisonous gas, killing himself and everyone in the room. Jessica and Paul make their way to an outpost where they are reunited with Dr. Kynes, who knew the attack was coming and did nothing because she works for the Emperor, and Duncan, Idaho. During this time, Dr. Kynes becomes convinced she did the wrong thing and allies herself with Paul. It also helps that he kind of starts leaning into the whole Lisan Al-Gaib thing. The Sardaukar find them, and both Kynes and Duncan give their lives so that Paul and Jessica can escape. The two continue their journeys through the desert, almost get devoured by a sandworm, and come across a small party of Fremen led by Stilgar. He allows them to join them, but one of their party does not like that. This man, Jamis, invokes a battle to the death with Paul, and it is here that Paul takes his first life. As his visions have told him, in order for him to rise to the rank of Kwisatz Haderach, he must learn first to kill. With this, the two are allowed to join the Fremen party, and together they travel deeper into the desert to the nearest siege. And back in the city, we see that the Baron was injured, but is still alive. He is resting in this oil bath. It looks like oil. It might not be oil. He commands his nephew to resume spice production and to kill every last Fremen on Arrakis. And this is where Dune Part 1 ends. I love this movie and this universe so much. As someone who hadn't read the books prior to watching this movie, it got me fully immersed and fully excited about this universe. For a limited time very recently, they re-released the first Dune in select theaters, but at the very end of that viewing, they showed an exclusive look at one of the scenes from Dune Part 2. I was lucky enough to get to see that sneak preview, and all I will say on the matter is it made me very excited for where Dune Part 2 is going. And so I hope now that you're ready for the next movie, and I hope that I've made this entertaining and as interesting for you as it is for me. And if I did, then thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video, and thank you so much for watching. We are on the road to 3,000 subscribers, which is insane. You all are fantastic, and it means the world that you've stuck around and just continued to enjoy these videos. And of course, a huge shout out goes out to the patrons who are up here on the right side of the screen. I know that. Sean and my top tier patrons, RD and Snowy, thank you so much for sticking with me from the beginning and supporting my dream of doing this for you all full time. And if you happen to also want to support me in exchange for stuff like weekly live streams where I talk about the stuff that I'm working on, exclusive content when I'm working on big projects, and just so much more, then feel free to join us over on Patreon. The link is in the description and on the end card. This was a bit of a shorter video by my standards, but I've got a big one coming next. I hope you're excited for that because I know that I am. And